Hi everyone, Amy here. Thanks for joining me again today. And I'm going to talk about lies again. Lies of the narcissist and lies of the new supply. Now, the narcissist that I was involved in, as I may have alluded in another video, I did do a background check on him, and I did so after the fact of the relationship. I was seeing that in all these videos and articles how the narcissists are pathological liars, but I didn't think my narc ex was lying about anything, but I soon discovered very quickly that I was wrong. What did I find? I did background checks, 4 of them, to make sure that I would get the correct information. Because some of these search sites and background check sites have some are more updated than others. And I wanted to also check to make sure what I was getting was true. I checked myself to see how accurate they were, and found out that they were very accurate and would provide the information that I do need to know. So I was stunned beyond belief what I found out. Like we talked about the false persona and how narcissists have to put on this mask and pretend they're someone different than they are. And then when you're alone with them, especially when this relationship continues a little bit longer, they tend to let their guard down and that mask slip at times. So anyways, what I found out about him was, number 1, his career. He told me he had worked in manufacturing in a small town in Minnesota, and also in Florida, I believe. He had told me he had lived in 4 different cities in different states. He told me that he had been a truck driver. He had been an owner-operator, and also that the last truck company that he did work for, that he worked for a year and then retired. He told me he had been married 3 times. He has told people who live in this community that he has only been married twice. Now, what I found out was, oh yes, and the big one, he had told me that he had been a deputy sheriff in the state of Arizona in Maricopa County, and he had worked there for 3 or 4 years. When I did the background checks, I did find that he had been employed in Phoenix, but certainly not as a deputy sheriff. He was employed as an HVAC and cooling engineer for Phoenix Biltmore Hotel. And And I also found he had been in a couple more states working for a different company that sells clothing and shoes. There was no mention of him ever having a truck license. You have to have a special license to drive a truck and a semi. Totally missing. And the last company that he claims to work for and wears a jacket by them doesn't show up. That would have been his very last job before he retired. Nothing, nada, zip. And also, I found that he had had a fourth marriage. I found that in 2005, he was married in the state of Nevada in Las Vegas to a woman in the small town of Minnesota in which he had resided. Now, he and I, 2 years ago, went to Las Vegas. And now I sit back and I think, gosh, did we pass any of those chapels that he may have been married in? And also to wonder whatever goes through his mind when he's in a place that he well knows, and he knows that he has been lying about a marriage that took place there. I did find that he was indeed divorced, and he moved from this small town in Minnesota to El Paso, Texas, 3 months before his then wife initiated divorce papers. And by piecing things together, I tend to think that, and this is my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm usually pretty clever and can piece things together, that he spent his life moving from city and state after a marriage would break or relationship would break up. He'd go to a new community and start again. And when he returned from El Paso, he came up to the city I am in St. Paul. He also had an awful lot of P.O. boxes. Even though he had physical addresses where his mail could be delivered to. But he persisted in using these boxes. And now, as I sit here, I just really feel that he goes from one relationship to another, to another, to another. And a lot of times changing the city and the state where he lives. Now, that truck driving would have come from it, as he puts it, this truck driving, and when he had his owner-operator, would have been when he was living in this small town in Minnesota. It's probably about 100 miles from here. So that would have shown up, and being the last source of employment that he has had, it would be there. And certainly a license to drive truck would be there. I am also retired right now. My nursing license is posted. It also lists the home that I owned and listed where I had been living. All of that was correct. He also told me that he had owned a home in this small town and that he had been there for about 10, 12 years or better, raising his youngest son, and he had bought a home. There's no record of him ever owning a home. The only home that is owned by anyone that is listed as his residences is the one that was owned and is currently owned by his fourth wife. Okay, when I found out some of this stuff, I wanted to let him know that I knew. So, as I may have said, I live in a 55 plus complex. And the reason I do, not only am I over the age of 55, but my aging father lives here, and I am here to care for him. And anyways, when you live in a community where there are people 55 and plus, there tend to be activities, and one of those activities is bingo. Bingo is played every Wednesday. Rain, shine, doesn't make any difference. So when he was collecting for the bingo, for each game or match, he would come and pick up my money, and I would say, "Who's this woman?" "Gee, I heard you were married to her." "You've been married 4 times, not 3 times. Each time he would come back, I would give him a little bit more. And I said, nothing checks out, Ivan." Excuse me, I shouldn't have used the name. But nothing checked out. And I told him so. And so at the end of the bingo games, I moved to another table that my dad was at that happened to be next to the table he and the new supply were at. And I said to her, I said, "Gee, did he ever tell you that he's been married 4 times? And she looked at me and she says, "I don't care." And I said, "Well, I don't care either, except for the fact that he lied, and my whole relationship with him was based on lies. Nothing about him is true." So he overhears this, and he's almost like cowering in a corner like this, going, "Amy, go to your room. Amy, take a pill. Amy, you're unstable. Amy, go to your room, take a pill." And all the time he's cowering. And I laughed, and I said, right on cue. Perfect gaslighting. You are certainly not original. So, there is more to the story, but I will get into that story at a different date. Anyways, now to backtrack, this narc threw me out as garbage and took up with this woman who lives right down the hall from me. He lives in this building also, but in a different building. I used to live in that building for the last two and a half years of our relationship. I lived in the same building he did. So he takes up with this woman down the hall from me. So I get a front row seat to whatever is happening. And of course, what I don't see, people tell me. Anyways, a couple of weeks ago, he was telling everyone that they were going to Florida for 2 weeks and staying in this condo. And a mutual friend of ours, he's pretty much dumped her since all this has gone on. Since he threw me away, he basically has thrown her away too. So, anyways, he wouldn't tell my friend what city, and she had asked, would it be Orlando? And he says, oh, we're miles from there. But it was near Orlando, Florida. And they were to be there for two weeks at this condo. And my friend also said to me, you know, he's got this condition where he can't be out in the sun. And she has psoriasis, and she can't be in the sun with her skin condition. So what are they going to do there? Well, I guess it turns out that they didn't want to go to, they were very close to Orlando, and they didn't want to go to theme parks, so they went to SeaWorld, and that was it. Well, they show up last Saturday. They had returned back here the night before, 8 days ahead of schedule. So there was a community breakfast. I was not there, but I was informed by several people that the new supply was there, and she was talking very loudly to a couple of his, well, 3 of his flying monkeys, and also so the whole room could hear. And she told a whopper of a story. She said that her business, her job, contacted her and said they needed her to go to Las Vegas for a convention. Okay, this woman is a bookkeeper. She is not in charge of anything, and it seems to be a fairly menial job, as she has complained for well over 2 years that she doesn't have any money and that her job doesn't pay well. And she is well past that, well, few years past the age of retirement, and is still working, and has told people she's going to have to work for the rest of her life. The company she works for is very small, and the name of it is, they supply paper, products, to businesses, the paper towels, toilet paper, that type of thing. I have looked it up, and it's not a big company. Well, first off, what company would call someone on vacation and say, you need to come back here, and then you're going to Las Vegas for a convention? Also, she was telling everyone how her company was paying for their flight out to Vegas